Today, we will be putting every NBA team in a tier list to predict how the NBA season will go. Let's talk about it. First tier we got is the F tier. These are the teams that, in my opinion, have no chance at the playoffs, no chance as the play-in, and are just in a rebuilding state. Our first team, the Utah Jazz. The Utah Jazz are the one team where I was thinking about putting up to the D tier because they do have some interesting guys. People like Lauri Markkanen, who's one of the best scorers in the NBA. People like Jordan Clarkson. They have interesting young guys like Taylor Hendricks and Keontae George. But in my opinion, the Western Conference is too stacked to really see a world where they do make the play-in. Our next team in the F tier is the Washington Wizards. They have a collection of a lot of young guys who don't have a lot of star potential, in my opinion. They're led by Kyle Kuzma and at times Jordan Poole. They still have guys like Corey Kispert, who's good on the roster. You know, they have some interesting vets. They brought in like a Jonas Valanciunas. I like their draft pick of Alex Sarr. Bubba Carrington with the 14th pick was, in my opinion, a nice pick. But the team is just simply not going to be good next year. The next team in the F tier for me is the Portland Trail Blazers. Another team with just a lot of young guys. A team that's not trying to win. And I look at their roster, and while they do have some interesting vets that I think can help them win, like an Ayton, like a Robert Williams, like an Anthony Simons at this point, they just don't have enough star power to compete with teams in the Western Conference. I'm expecting a big year for Scoot Henderson to show something. I'm expecting, another Shaedon Sharpe jump. They have some interesting stuff going on in Portland, but are simply just not a good team in the Western Conference. The next team in the F tier is a team that hasn't been here the last couple of years, has more been in that CD tier, and that's the Chicago Bulls. We saw them let go of DeMar DeRozan in free agency, and that's a big loss, considering the fact that Lonzo Ball is going to be coming back, and the injuries are kind of scary for me. Is he going to start next year? Is he not? Zach LaVine, we know he's kind of struggled to stay healthy, and his play hasn't been the level he's used to, and he might get shipped off, so we don't know how the Bulls will be next year. Kobe White is going to be the starter. Like, the Bulls just have a lot of stuff going on. They drafted Matas Buzelis, who was very good in Summer League, but once again, he's a forward rookie who I wouldn't expect to be super impactful year one and help, get them in the play-in. I just don't see it. I think the Bulls are pretty secure in the F tier. The next team we got in the F tier is the Brooklyn Nets. Another team that's really easy to predict. They lost their best player, Mikal Bridges. I wouldn't be surprised if other vets like Cam Johnson and Dorian Finney-Smith get shipped off. The team's just not good once again. The last team we got in the F tier is the Charlotte Hornets. Another team where I thought maybe they could be in the D tier, and there's a chance they can still be in there, but I just don't see it. I don't trust LaMelo's health. I don't trust Mark Williams' health. I like Brandon Miller a lot, expect him to take another jump. I think the Charlotte Hornets are just a team that is still a couple years away. Now we get into the D tier. Now the D tier teams are, they're all right. They're in the conversation to make the play-in. If everything went right, they could be a play-in team. This is a little more subjective. They're not like the bottom feeder teams. They're not teams trying to be bad, I should say. These are teams that are still trying to compete, but might not have the level of talent to do that. But if everything went right, they could be. We got the Houston Rockets. Now, the Rockets are a team where, I think they have a real chance to make the play-in, and that's because they have vets with interesting young players. Fred VanVleet was good for them last year. You have guys like Steven Adams, who you traded for. You have Dylan Brooks, who I know is a controversial topic, but still a decent player. You have the young guys like Jabari Smith Jr., who I think is going to be very impactful next year. Amen Thompson, who showed very good flashes. You're going to have Tari Eason back, hopefully, for the whole year, healthy. You're going to have Cam Whitmore in his second year, who I think is going to be very good. You have Reed Shepherd, who was a Summer League standout, and I could see a world where he is in the starting lineup by the end of the year. And you have one of the best young big men, Alperen Sengun, running your team. They also have one of the best coaches in the NBA. The Western Conference is super stacked. There's a lot of teams above them, in my opinion, but they do deserve to be in this tier. The next team we got in this tier is the Spurs. A team where they were kind of in the middle of F and D tier for me. I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt because I believe in Victor Wembanyama so much. I think there's a chance he is an all-star this year. The addition of Chris Paul is obviously going to be huge for his development. I like their young guys like Stephon Castle. Overall, I don't see it. But if everything went right, wouldn't be shocked if they got the 10th seed. Our next team is the Atlanta Hawks, a team that, in my opinion, got worse this year with the addition of Zachary Reese-Shea. and they lost, some guys like DeJounte Murray for Dyson Daniels. I think they got worse, but they're in a weak Eastern Conference, so they're going to be in the conversation for a play-in position. I would expect them to be in there in all honesty. Our next team in this tier is the Toronto Raptors. Another team where it's like, they're not very good, but they're in the Eastern Conference. I think they could get something done. Scotty Barnes is obviously very good. I like RJ Barrett a lot, Emmanuel Quickley, expecting a jump from a guy like Grady Dick. They have some interesting stuff going on in Toronto. I think they'll be in the conversation simply because the Eastern Conference is just not very good. Our next team is the Los Angeles Clippers, who lost Paul George in free agency. While they added a guy like Derrick Jones Jr., I really just don't think this is going to get them to where they want to be. The Los Angeles Clippers over the years have not been able to stay healthy, and they're going to be asking Kawhi Leonard to stay healthy even more because you don't have Paul George. You lost Russell Westbrook, who at times was very good for you. James Harden's getting older. I just don't see this team being very good next year, especially because the West is so stacked. I think if everything went right, Kawhi played all the games, they could be in the play-in. Our last team is the Detroit Pistons. We're a team that I'm very high on if you watched my Detroit Pistons video. I think they are going to be in the play-in, but I've been saying this for a couple years now and it hasn't been happening, so I had to put them in this tier. I'm not looking like an idiot putting them in a tier above. Okay, now we get into the C tier. This is the teams where I feel they're guaranteed a play-in spot. We got our first team, the Miami Heat, who, if you watch Miami Heat video, you know I'm not as high on as other people. But the team is still, decent. They have Jimmy Butler. They have Tyler Hero. They have Bam Adebayo. I think they have enough to get them through the regular season and get into the play-in or the playoffs. We'll see what happens, but I think the Heat are going to be in there. Our next team is Golden State Warriors. This is maybe just my fan side showing. Maybe they should be a tier below. But I think the Warriors will be in there because they did get better this offseason, in my opinion. The loss of Klay Thompson and Chris Paul might end up hurting them, but I think the addition of guys like Kyle Anderson, DeAnthony Melton, and Buddy Hield will overall get them into a position to be a play-in team. My next team is the Los Angeles Lakers, who didn't really do much in free agency, but you still have LeBron James, you still have Anthony Davis, you still have guys like D'Lo and Rui Hachimura. I think they're going to be good enough to get a play-in spot. And the next team is the New Orleans Pelicans, who I'm a little worried about, right? The reason they're not a tier above this is simply because I don't know if Brandon Ingram's going to be on the roster next year. And that kind of scares me because I think trading Brandon Ingram would be a big mistake for this team. I always thought this team is kind of lacking shot creation outside of a guy like CJ McCollum. Obviously, I like the DeJounte Murray pickup. He will add some of that. But I think if they do keep Brandon Ingram, they're going to be a tier above. But I think they're going to trade him. My final team is the Sacramento Kings, a team I wanted to put a tier above, but I just couldn't rationalize that. I think they're on the same tier as the other guys. I like the pickup of DeMar DeRozan, but it is kind of a funky fit. Not a lot of spacing in that starting lineup outside of Keegan Murray and Malik Monk, who I would expect to start. We'll see. Maybe they go Keon Ellis. I like the rookie selection of Devin Carter, who I think can be impactful, but I think they're a C-tier team in my opinion. Now we get to our B-tier teams. These are the teams where I'm guaranteeing they're going to be in the playoffs, right? These are the teams where I think they're solidified as one of the middle or top teams, but I don't see a really championship level roster. Our first team is the Memphis Grizzlies, who I'm very high on. I think there's a chance the Memphis Grizzlies have a top 3 seed. Now, the reason they're in this tier, not the tiers above, is simply because I don't think they're a real contender. I just think this is a situation where this team is very impactful. They're going to be really good in the regular season, and I think they deserve this spot. The next team is the Denver Nuggets, which might be a surprise, but I think they got worse this offseason. The loss of KCP is a big deal, especially in the Western Conference, where the starting lineups are stacked. And I don't look at the Denver Nuggets as a team anymore where I'm like, they're stacked. I thought KCP was a huge part of that roster. He was their best perimeter defender. He was one of their best spot-up shooters outside Michael Porter Jr. Losing him is a big deal. You're going to be asking young guys like Christian Braun to step up a lot, Julian Strother, and while I think they're good players, I don't know if either of those guys are starting 2-level guards in the NBA. The Western Conference is stacked. I think it's going to be an adjustment period. Jamal Murray's coming off a terrible Olympics. We'll see what happens. I think this team's going to be a playoff team, but I just don't see a championship team anymore. My next team in this tier is the Phoenix Suns. The Phoenix Suns had a great offseason, adding guys like Tyus Jones, who's the best addition for what he's making in the entire free agency was huge. They needed point guard play. They addressed it with Tyus Jones. They addressed it with Monte Morris. They've brought back guys like Bol Bol, who's impactful for them. Josh Okogie. I like their draft. Ryan Dunn, Osei Ighodaro. I like Jalen Bridges on a two-way. The Suns had a really good offseason. I'm just not drinking the Kool-Aid as a championship contender for this team anymore. I think they're still going to have continuity issues with a whole new coach. A lot of their role players walked. I still think they're missing impactful big man depth. I think Mason Plumlee's all right. I think Yusuf Nurkic is all right. But when it comes to actual playoff play, I don't think those guys are good enough to get you to a championship level team. That's why the Phoenix Suns are here. My next team is the Cleveland Cavaliers, which in my opinion is just a very good team in the Eastern Conference, right? They're solidified as like a 4 or 5 seed to me. They're going to be there. I think they're good. I just don't think they're a championship team. My next team is the Orlando Magic, who had a great season last year, and I would expect them to repeat that. The Eastern Conference isn't great, obviously, but I think that team's really stacked, really loaded, and they have interesting guys on that team. The addition of KCP is very, very good for a team that is lacking three-point shooting. KCP is going to do that for you. I know there was conversations of guys like Malik Monk and Klay Thompson, but I think KCP is a great option who they were able to get. I think the Orlando Magic are going to be really good next year. My next team is the Dallas Mavericks. Mavericks fans might be mad about this, but I think this is a good spot for them, right? I think they're a solidified playoff team. I just don't think they're a contender. I think they got worse this offseason, simply put. My next team is the Indiana Pacers. I think they're really good. I think they can make noise in the playoffs, but once again, in my opinion, are just not a finals contender, so that's why they're in this tier. Okay, now we get to the A tier. These are the teams that, in my opinion, are the top of their conferences. These are teams where I could see a world where they're in the championship. So my first team is the OKC Thunder. Had probably the best offseason out of any team in the NBA, right? You bring in a guy like Alex Caruso for Josh Giddey. Great addition. You bring in a center like Isaiah Hartenstein. You were lacking big man depth all year last year, and you bring in one of the best big men from the playoffs last year onto your team. They have the young guys. They're in the prime of their career. Shea's obviously, in my opinion, a top 5, top 6 player. You have Jalen Williams, who only looks to be better. Chet Holmgren, I would expect to be better next year. They're just a super well-rounded team. They have defenders like Lou Dort and Alex Caruso and Cason Wallace. I like their young guys like Isaiah Joe, who they brought back. You have Aaron Wiggins, who you brought back. The team is just loaded, and I think they are a contender in the Western Conference. My next team is the Minnesota Timberwolves, which kind of exceeded expectations in the playoffs for I think many people. They swept the Suns, which I think a lot of people actually picked against them. Anthony Edwards had a breakout performance in the entire playoffs. Looks like a top 10 player at his peak. Cat is still an impactful NBA player. Rudy Gobert had a great defensive year last year. Mike Conley was good. And you also add an interesting young point guard like Rob Dillingham, who can help space the floor for Ant and also be a shot creator for now and the future. I think the Timberwolves stay the same. So I think they're a top team in the West, could win a championship. My next team is the Philadelphia 76ers, who had Paul George, Embiid, and Maxey. At the start of the offseason, I was a little worried on adding Paul George to them because I didn't know how they were going to fill out the other roster spots, but they were able to bring back Kelly Oubre, who was huge for them last year. They were able to bring in guys like Eric Gordon and Andre Drummond, who are impactful role players. I look at the Philadelphia 76ers and I see a team that is a real contender in the Eastern Conference. Now, do I think they're going to win a championship? No, but I do think they're in the conversation. The next team in this tier is the Milwaukee Bucks. I do think the Bucks are a very good team and do have the potential to win a championship and could be a top team in their conference. I like this spot for them. My next team is the New York Knicks, who probably, in my opinion, had the second best free agency. They add guys like Mikal Bridges, Cameron Payne. I see no reason why the Knicks can't be a top team in the East and can't, compete for a championship. And finally, we got my last tier, which is the S tier. And I think this team deserves to be here because, in my opinion, they're above everybody and deserve to be the favorite, and that's the Boston Celtics. I truly think the Boston Celtics are the overwhelming favorite to win the championship next year and repeat. And that's because I think they have the best combination of prime star players with role players and great coaching. I mean, you can't find that anywhere. And also they have the continuity, which I always harp on is a big thing in the NBA. You brought back the team that helped you win a championship. I think the Boston Celtics are going to repeat, so I think they deserve to be a spot above everybody else. Okay guys, it's time to let me know. Do you agree with my tier list or do you have other opinions? Let me know.